Less than 72 hours after signing a historic agreement on a screen, the United States and Iran are sitting across a table from each other in the Swiss Alps, with a 60-day clock already ticking. The question now is whether that countdown leads to a lasting peace or to something far more dangerous. Welcome to the Daily Briefing. I'm your host, and today we're taking a close look at what may be one of the most consequential diplomatic developments in a generation. The United States and Iran are in Switzerland right now, engaged in face-to-face talks over the implementation of a provisional peace agreement. There are high-stakes delegations on both sides, powerful mediators in the room, and as of this morning, very public threats still being exchanged even as the negotiations proceed. We're going to walk you through everything that's happened, who's in the room, what's already on the table, and what the warning signs look like. This story moves fast, so let's get into it. To understand where we are today, you have to start with Thursday, June 19th, 2026. According to the BBC, the United States and Iran signed a memorandum of understanding electronically on that date. This was not yet a final peace deal. Think of it as a framework, a shared commitment to the idea that a final deal is possible and a deadline to get there. That deadline is 60 days from the signing. The MOU includes a commitment to end fighting on all fronts, including in Lebanon, and crucially, it includes a provision for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most strategically vital waterways. That electronic signing set the stage for what came next. By Saturday, June 21st, delegations from both countries had arrived in Switzerland for in-person talks. According to Euronews, those talks are being held at the Bergenstock luxury hotel complex, situated in the Swiss canton of Nidwalden, perched above Lake Lucerne. If that location sounds familiar, it should. Bergenstock has been used for high-level international diplomacy before, and Switzerland's long tradition of neutrality makes it a natural setting for talks of this sensitivity. So who is in the room? According to Al Jazeera, the American delegation is being led by Vice President J.D. Vance. Alongside him are Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. That is a notably senior team, and the presence of the Vice President himself signals that the administration is treating these talks as a genuine priority, not a formality. On the Iranian side, the delegation is led by Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf and Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Again, these are significant figures. The talks also have powerful mediators involved. According to Al Jazeera, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Pakistan's Army Chief Asim Munir, and Qatar's Prime Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani were all expected to participate in the Switzerland talks in a mediating capacity. The involvement of both Qatar and Pakistan in brokering this agreement is significant. Qatar has long served as a back channel between the United States and Iran, and Pakistan brings its own regional credibility to the table. Euronews reports that Qatar's foreign ministry announced that specialized technical and expert working groups have already been formed to begin negotiating the specific terms of a final deal that would address all the issues outlined in the MOU. In other words, the diplomatic machinery is already in motion. Now here's where the story gets complicated, because while all of this constructive diplomacy is underway, both sides have been publicly trading. According to Euronews, President Trump posted on Truth Social, threatening to strike Iran, in his words, very hard again, only harder, if Iran did not stop Hezbollah from, again quoting directly, causing trouble in Lebanon. That post came on Saturday, the same day delegations were arriving in Switzerland for talks. The BBC reports that Iran's lead negotiator, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, did not back down in response. He dismissed Trump's threat and stated that Iran's armed forces were prepared for confrontation. This kind of simultaneous negotiation and public posturing is uncomfortable to watch, but it is not entirely without precedent in high-stakes diplomacy. Leaders often need to signal toughness to domestic audiences, even while their delegations are engaged in serious talks behind closed doors. That does not make it any less alarming from the outside, but it is worth keeping in mind that the presence of both sides at the table in Switzerland suggests neither government has walked away from the process. Lebanon is clearly one of the most urgent items on the agenda. The BBC reports that the provisional agreement already includes an end to fighting on all fronts, including in Lebanon. But the situation on the ground has not been stable. The BBC also reports that on Friday, June 20th, the United States declared a new ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, following an upsurge in fighting in southern Lebanon. That ceasefire declaration came just one day after the MOU was signed, which tells you something about the fragility of the security situation that these talks are trying to address. President Trump's Truth Social post about Hezbollah came in that same context. The concern from the American perspective appears to be that even as diplomacy proceeds at the highest levels, armed actors on the ground in Lebanon are not necessarily following the same script. Ghalibaf's defiant response, meanwhile, suggests that Iran is not willing to be publicly pressured into making concessions it has not already agreed to make at the table. Then there is the Strait of Hormuz. The BBC reports that Iran announced on Saturday that it had shut the Strait of Hormuz. This is, on its face, an extraordinary statement. However, the BBC also reports that tracking data shows vessels have continued to pass through the strait, which suggests that Iran's announcement may be more of a signaling move than an operational reality. Still, the fact that Iran is making this declaration publicly, on the same day that talks are beginning in Switzerland, is a reminder of just how much leverage Tehran believes it holds in this negotiation. The MOU, as the BBC has reported, specifically includes a provision for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz as part of the deal. So the question of the strait is not just a dramatic backdrop. It is literally one of the central items on the negotiating agenda. Let's step back for a moment and think about the broader significance of what is happening here. The United States and Iran have been adversaries for nearly half a century, since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. There have been periods of indirect diplomacy, back-channel communications, and negotiated arrangements on specific issues. But direct, face-to-face talks of this scope and ambition are extraordinarily rare. The fact that a memorandum of understanding has already been signed and that both sides have committed to reaching a final deal within 60 days represents a level of diplomatic engagement that would have seemed almost. The involvement of Qatar and Pakistan as co-mediators is also worth noting from a historical perspective. Both countries have invested significant diplomatic capital in this process. Qatar has served as a trusted intermediary in numerous regional conflicts. Pakistan brings its own regional credibility to the table. The fact that both nations are present not just as facilitators, but as active participants in the Switzerland talks reflects a broader shift in how this kind of multilateral diplomacy is being organized. The 60-day timeline is ambitious, arguably very ambitious. The issues at stake, ranging from Lebanon and Hezbollah to the Strait of Hormuz to whatever broader security architecture the two sides are trying to construct, are enormously complex. The public posturing and threat-making we saw on Saturday are a reminder that both governments are operating under intense domestic pressure. Here's what to watch in the days and weeks ahead. First, watch the situation in Lebanon closely. The new ceasefire declared on Friday is fragile, and any renewed fighting will put immediate pressure on the talks. Second, watch the Strait of Hormuz. Regardless of what the tracking data shows today, Iran's announcement of a closure is a pressure point that has real implications for global energy markets and for the credibility of any final agreement. Third, watch for signals from both delegations about the progress of those technical working groups that Qatar announced. If those groups are meeting and making progress, that is a positive sign. If we start hearing leaks about breakdowns or disagreements, that will tell a different story. And perhaps most importantly, watch the 60-day clock. The Memorandum of Understanding was signed on June 19th. That puts the deadline for a final deal somewhere in the third week of August. Between now and then, there will be enormous pressure on both sides, from their own domestic audiences, from regional allies, and from the rest of the world watching this process very carefully. To bring it all together, the United States and Iran are in Switzerland today, engaged in face-to-face talks over a provisional peace agreement that was signed just days ago. The delegations are senior, the mediators are serious, and the issues on the table are enormous. There are also real tensions visible in real time. with public threats being exchanged even as diplomats sit across from each other. Whether this moment leads to a historic final deal within 60 days, or whether it unravels under the weight of those tensions, is one of the most important questions in international affairs right now. That's the daily briefing for today, Saturday, June 21st, 2026. We'll be following this story closely and we'll bring you updates as the Switzerland talks develop. Thank you for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.